Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm your host, Rick Bennett. Please consider donating or purchasing a transcript by going to our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. You'll help support other documentaries and podcasts such as this. We're continuing our discussion with Anne Wilde. She's a polygamy expert, and we're going to talk more about some of the smaller polygamist groups, such as the Kingston group and the Harmston group. We'll also talk about the infamous Ervil LeBaron, a polygamist and an assassin. He was responsible for the deaths not only of his own brother, but other leaders such as the Apostolic United Brethren's Rulon, Allred. We'll talk more about this infamous man who died in a Utah prison in 1981. Check out our conversation. But before you do that, I just wanted to mention we've got Christmas coming up, and I hope you'll consider purchasing some of these transcripts for some of your friends or for yourself. I think people who are really interested in Mormon history will love to learn more about some of these first-person accounts. So we've also got coming up Anne's story about her marriage in a future episode. So I hope you'll consider purchasing that as well. Now back to our conversation.
Okay, so you talk about other groups. There's a Davis County Co-op or Kingston group. They have about 2,000 members as well. Their leader is Paul Kingston, and he's in the South Salt Lake area. And they have, I don't know if you call it, I guess a priesthood council, but they are into it more. They started in 1935 as a United Order organization, not necessarily a polygamous organization or a fundamentalist or anything like that. It was during the Depression, shortly after 1935. And so they wanted to find ways of supporting their families on an economic level. So a lot of them are polygamous, but the United Order was the thing that got them going. So I know several of the people in that community. The women are amazing. You know, they have large families, and they work. A lot of the women are mothers and have full-time jobs, and so anyway, that's another organization. There's some smaller groups. There was one in Manti that's pretty much down to very few families, the Jim Harmston group. There's the branch. There's Gerald Peterson, and when he died, his son Jerry Peterson kind of took over. I think he's still the leader of that.
And it's called the branch?
Well, there's another name for it too. I can't remember right offhand what it is. So there are certain break-offs, it's much smaller. Nelson Naylor group, that's a break-off from Centennial Park. So, you know, they have about 300. They have a priesthood council.
300, it's a very small group.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, some of the others are even smaller than that. So.
Wow. So would it be safe to say that the AUB is probably the biggest
It is.
group now? It's about 7,500.
It's the biggest one that's in unity or in one name or whatever. They've had their issues too, and some of them will maybe go, but don't. They kind of question whether the leadership has I don't know. There's some problems, but you know, in the LDS Church, there's problems. We have to admit. So it's a tough time right now, but don't forget the independents.
Yes.
That's what I am.
Okay, so
I consider myself an independent fundamentalist Mormon, and that's because I do not belong to any of the organized groups. And there's about 15,000. Oh,
so they're the biggest.
Well, but they aren't a group.
Yes, yes.
So there are a lot that believe in keeping these eternal principles alive, not just pro-marriage, but others as well, as best as they can amongst the families. And they just don't feel impressed, and I don't, to actually join or be baptized into any of the groups.
Okay, so independent. So that would just be, so unaffiliated is kind of the biggest
kind of,
group. So you would have an unaffiliated, would that be, I guess, LDS members secretly practicing polygamy? Would you consider those independents
Or
as well?
it could be fundamentalists that believe in those early doctrines, don't necessarily live plural marriage, but they want to raise their kids in the LDS Church. I know families like that. And so they keep quiet. They go to church, and they are very quiet about what they say. They go along with the program, and maybe sometime they'll reach a point in their lives where they feel like, I can't support that anymore, so they'll just become inactive.
Okay. And as well as maybe FLDS who've left, or AUB who've left, or Centennial Park has left?
Well, I don't know if FLDS has joined the LDS Church, any of them, but the AUB, some of them have joined the LDS Church.
Well, what I'm saying is there are probably breakoffs from each of these groups that would be independent. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, I guess so. That's going to vary, because some of them may not believe in fundamentalism at all anymore.
Okay.
There are some teenagers that were so controlled as they were younger that when they left, they became pretty wild into drinking and women and things like that they could not have anything to do with there, that when they got out into society, that was a big temptation for them. And so there are some of those that don't want a thing to do with religion. So you wouldn't call them independent fundamentalists.
No. They would just be non-religious.
They've gone their own direction. And so that's why I say it's really confusing when you try and designate, okay, this group and this group. It's pretty hard to make these definitive definitions and draw certain lines, and it's kind of hazy.
I did want to ask you a question about another group that I've heard of, Ervil LeBaron. So can you talk about his group? That's kind of an interesting group.
Well, I don't know where to start. He came from a family that claimed to get their priesthood through Benjamin F. Johnson. Mm-hmm. And according to the story, Benjamin F. Johnson was adopted son of Joseph Smith. And so he passed the priesthood on down through that line. And it was a large family. Ervil LeBaron was one of the older sons, and they felt like theirs was the only true lineage of priesthood. And I don't know how to go. It's pretty much what was in the news. He's responsible for killing or the death of about 20 people, and I know that because I knew some of them. Ogden was introduced to him one time under a fictitious name, and so we went out to a meeting and thought this was this guy's name, Stilson, and lo and behold, shortly after that we saw a picture, wanted, Ervil LeBaron, with a picture of this guy that we had met. And he even came and stayed in my home under that other name. And then when I found out who he was, I was a little concerned, but fortunately I didn't know who he was at the time he stayed in my home. It was just kind of a whole different aspect of fundamentalism. I never really have considered his role as a fundamentalist Mormon. Maybe generally speaking you could say that, but there's a colony now, Colonial LeBaron, that has a lot of the people in the LeBaron family, but his role was more militant. You either follow me or else. And Ogden got a letter to that effect, and we were a little concerned about whether or not it was the or else. And I could go into an interesting story on that, but I think I'll pass. So anyway...
So let's back up a little bit. So where did he claim to get his priesthood authority from?
From Almadeo LeBaron was his dad. Okay. He got it from Benjamin Johnson. Benjamin Johnson was the adopted son of Joseph Smith.
So from Nauvoo?
Yeah.
Okay, so... Well, because that's like 1840, and this is...
that didn't come down through the 1886 thing at all.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, because Ervil LeBaron was a polygamist, is that correct?
Yep.
So, we talked a little bit about 1933 seemed to be a pivotal year. The Third Manifesto, you had the Allred group, or the the AUB group. You had another group that kind of morphed into the Centennial Park and the FLDS. Does Ervil LeBaron?
No, they came down through a different line totally.
So he was more of an independent.
Oh, I don't want to call him an independent. I don't want to claim him.
So he just.
No, he was responsible for Rulon Allred's death. He sent
Yes.
2 of his wives, is what I understand.
Why did he?
Because he was a very jealous, power-hungry guy, and he was the only one that had the priesthood authority. And if you didn't follow him, there was a letter to 4 people, and Ogden's name is on that, and so was Rulon's, and Rulon came up dead, and so we were very concerned for a while. But then you had I haven't thought about this part of it for a long time. Rulon, and who was the one that he had killed? His brother. And Rulon was the one that started to write the book on the LeBaron family, and then he died in a car accident. And Charlotte, one of his wives, had to finish that one. It's on the LeBaron story.
So LeBaron sent a bunch of wives to become essentially assassins to kill people.
I don't know if it was always wives. It wasn't always wives.
But some of them were.
But he just sent people to kill other people.
Because he just basically wanted to consolidate power in the polygamous Mormon
And that's
community.
why there was, he just was the one he was the one mighty and strong. He was the one that was supposed to take over everything. And
So he was his own man. He was just kind of
connected to this.
Because there is a LeBaron group now. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess you'd call it a LeBaron group, but they're descendants. And they're not all descendants of Ervil. Some of them are descendants of Rulon, and why can't I think of the guy's name brother's name that he killed? For some reason it escapes me. But anyway, there was a lot of jealousy among the brothers, LeBaron brothers.
Okay. So.
And he was finally arrested, and died in jail, in prison.
Okay, so this is probably in the 70s where he's killing Rulon Allred and some of these others. Is that right?
Yeah, Rulon died in 79.
79. Okay.
Was it 79? I think it was 79.
And I don't know. It seems like he was even trying to go after President Kimball. Have you heard that, or am I making that up?
Oh, he had a lot of people on his hit list. Yeah, and the church authorities were very concerned. They doubled security at one time because he had made threats. Against
lots of people.
I can't remember who it was. Whoever was president of the church at the time.
But he's responsible for about 20 deaths.
That I know of.
And maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a strange
the person
story.
in whose home we were in, that we met him by his other name, that guy came up missing in the next week.
Oh, you're kidding.
And we know very well what happened to him.
Wow. So was his body ever found, or?
I can't remember. But I do remember that it was definitely pinned on him.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Anne Wilde. In our next conversation, we'll get a little bit personal, and we'll ask about Anne's marriage to her husband, Ogden Kraut.
Well, just quickly, I was born and raised in the LDS Church. I'm very happy in it. Went to BYU on a scholarship, graduated with honors. One of those friends was Ogden Kraut. And so when the marriage didn't work out a year later, I became Ogden's second wife. Was married to him for 33 years, and then he died in 2002, 15 years ago. Click here to subscribe, click here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some other videos that we've done here on YouTube. We hope you'll use this as a valuable resource to learn more about Mormon history.